The alarm rings, cutting through the silence of a cold, gray morning. It's 6 a.m., the same time every day. Mark has been up at this hour for years, a routine ingrained deep into his bones. With a practiced hand, he silences the alarm and pulls himself out of bed. The house is quiet, save for the hum of the fridge and the soft tap of his worn sneakers against the wooden floor. He doesn't need to check the time, he already knows. Coffee first, then a quick glance at the news, and off to work. No exceptions. This is how it's always been. Mark, 42, is the kind of person who thrives on routine. He's a senior project manager at a small but growing tech firm, dedicated, meticulous, and, above all, reliable. His colleagues trust him, his boss values him, and his wife, Claire, knows he'll always be there when it matters. The house he's built with Claire is a reflection of his life, a well-oiled machine, everything in its place. The mornings are spent checking emails, reviewing his to-do list, and stepping into the office with the same steady pace that has carried him for nearly 2 decades. His life is defined by loyalty. Loyalty to his work, to his family, and to the long-term stability he's worked tirelessly to create. He hasn't missed a deadline in years, hasn't taken a sick day in months, and his commitment to Claire, though sometimes unspoken, is as solid as the walls of their home. But then, just like that, the rug is pulled out from under him. It happens at 3:30 p.m., during a routine meeting at work. The company is downsizing, and Mark is one of the casualties. No warning, no build-up, just a cold, impersonal email from HR, followed by a brief conversation with his boss. The reason? A downturn in the industry. Nothing personal, they say. It's just business. The room is spinning, but Mark doesn't flinch. His fingers grip the edge of the desk, his jaw clenched, but his eyes remain calm. He's been through setbacks before, but this is different. He knows it, and he can feel the weight of it pressing down on him. As the words sink in, Mark doesn't lash out. He doesn't raise his voice or demand answers. He simply nods, his mind already calculating the next move. This is just the beginning. For the next few weeks, Mark's routine continues, but something feels off. At first, it's barely noticeable. Just small things that seem insignificant at the time. He arrives at the office each morning to find a faint sense of distance in the air, as if the space between him and his colleagues has grown ever so slightly. There's no immediate cause, no overt hostility, but a subtle shift. The first crack in the veneer appears during a team meeting. Mark's manager, Sarah, gives him a tight smile when he walks in, a smile that doesn't reach her eyes. It's brief, a flash of discomfort that's gone almost before he can register it. He brushes it off. After all, stress has been high lately with the company's restructuring. But then, during the discussion, Mark finds himself being sidelined. He pitches an idea, something he's worked on in his spare time, and Sarah nods curtly, her gaze flicking to Kevin, the new guy in the room. Without skipping a beat, she asks Kevin for his thoughts on the topic, bypassing Mark entirely. The meeting continues, but Mark's focus drifts. It's a small slight, a change that feels almost imperceptible, but the weight of it settles on his shoulders. Later, in the break room, he notices that his co-workers' conversations falter when he walks in. The laughter that once echoed through the room now dies in a strained silence. No one seems to meet his gaze, and when they do, it's brief and awkward, as if they're all holding back something, an unspoken truth that Mark can't quite place. A few days later, during a routine email check, Mark realizes that a project he's been managing for months is now being handled by someone else. His inbox, once filled with updates and requests, is suddenly eerily quiet. He scrolls through the list of messages. Nothing. No new assignments, no new meetings, no communication. His hand hovers over the mouse as he stares at the empty inbox, a gnawing feeling creeping up his spine. He thinks back to his conversation with Sarah earlier in the week. The way she avoided eye contact when he asked for clarification on a new task. The way her smile felt just a little too tight. The subtle shift in tone that left him with the unmistakable sense that something was wrong. But no one has said anything directly. No one has outright excluded him. It's also quiet. Too quiet. And then there's Claire. The unease isn't just at work. At home, there's been a similar distance creeping between them. Claire, who once greeted him with a warm kiss when he came home, now simply nods in his direction. The small gestures, hand-holding during dinner, shared laughter over a TV show, have become rare. The space between them, though still physically close, feels colder, as if some invisible wall has risen between them. He tries to ask if anything's wrong, but Claire always responds with a vague smile, brushing it off with a nothing, just tired, or busy with work. But it's not just her mood that bothers him. It's the way she avoids certain topics now. She's no longer as interested in his day-to-day details, no longer asking about his work or plans. He catches her on her phone more often, scrolling through messages or texting under the table when they're supposed to be talking. It's the kind of thing he would have dismissed before, but now it feels like a deliberate attempt to keep him at arm's length. Mark doesn't say anything. He keeps his suspicions to himself, even as they continue to grow. The subtle shifts are too quiet, too small to confront directly. His mind begins to whirl, piecing together the moments that didn't quite add up, the way his colleagues' words have become more clipped, how Sarah's once welcoming demeanor has turned into polite formality, how Claire's smile seemed to fade the longer they sit in the same room. He wonders if his mind is playing tricks on him, if he's reading too much into it. But deep down, something is changing, and he's beginning to realize it's not just coincidence. He watches, listens, and waits, like a silent observer in his own life, all the while wondering just how far this quiet tension will go before it erupts into something far worse. But for now, he keeps his silence. The days bleed into each other, but the sense of something slipping away only grows more pronounced. Mark had once felt like a fixture in the office, a reliable presence that made things run smoothly. But now, the chair he used to occupy at every team meeting is often filled by someone else. It's subtle, but it hits him harder each time. The first time it happened, he thought it was just a mix-up. He had arrived a little late to the meeting, and someone else had taken the seat, but they didn't even apologize for it. It was as if they hadn't even noticed he was supposed to be there. The next time, the chair is still occupied, and he finds himself standing at the back of the room, silently waiting for the meeting to begin. His colleagues shuffle papers, focus on their laptops, and avoid eye contact. The hum of the air conditioning feels louder than usual, the room colder. No one acknowledges him, no one looks up. It's like being invisible, and the feeling gnaws at him. He stands there, feeling like a stranger in a place that used to feel like home. In the break room, things are no better. Once, he had sat down with Kevin and the others for coffee, talking about the latest tech trends and joking about their weekend plans. Now, Kevin never seems to be around when Mark enters. The conversations have become more clipped, and the chairs at the table have become increasingly occupied by new faces, people Mark doesn't recognize. His old coworkers have stopped asking him how his day is going. They just nod, smile briefly, and move on. There's no malice in it, no obvious hostility, but it's the absence that stings. The polite silence that drifts between them speaks volumes. At home, the isolation isn't any better. Claire, who used to greet him with a hug after a long day, now barely acknowledges his presence. She's always busy or tired, phrases that once seemed genuine but now feel more like shields, defenses keeping him at arm's length. She doesn't ask about his day anymore. And when he speaks about his work, she barely listens. It's as though she's somewhere else entirely, her mind lost in a world he's no longer a part of. When he asks if something's wrong, she brushes it off, her smile tight and strained, a response that feels rehearsed. The warmth they once shared has evaporated, leaving a coldness that no amount of casual conversation can thaw. Mark doesn't confront her. He doesn't yell or demand answers. Instead, he watches. He listens. He begins to notice the small details that had eluded him before. Claire's phone, always at her side, the texts she hides when he enters the room, the way she leaves the house for errands, but the timing never seems to line up with her explanations. It's not enough to accuse her of anything, not yet. But the unease grows with each passing day. The distance between them stretches, and in the silence, he can feel it. Something is slipping away, and he doesn't know how to stop it. In the office, the isolation continues. Mark is no longer included in the weekly planning meeting. His emails are left unanswered. He once had an open-door policy with Sarah, where he could ask for guidance or feedback. Now, even when he's in her office, she's distracted, looking at her phone or glancing over her shoulder as though she's expecting someone else. The casual exchanges they used to have now feel awkward, clipped. Every word, every glance, feels weighted. And when he does speak up in meetings, his suggestions are met with polite indifference. Sarah seems to have forgotten how much he contributed to the success of the last project, the one that had earned him so much praise just a few months ago. He begins to pay closer attention to the small changes, the way his colleagues now talk about projects as if they've been working on them for weeks, when he's sure he was the one who had started the ball rolling. He hears fragments of conversations in the hallway, hushed voices that stop when he approaches. They're not even trying to hide it anymore. One morning, when he's walking into the office, he sees Sarah and Kevin huddled together outside her office. They're whispering, their heads close together, and the moment they notice him, they both straighten up, forcing polite smiles. But it's the way they look at each other, almost with relief, that sends a chill down his spine. It's a glance Mark knows too well, the kind of glance you give when you think no one's watching, when you think you're safe. He starts to wonder if this is all part of a plan, a calculated effort to push him out. But why? He can't understand it. He hasn't done anything to deserve this. He was always there, always reliable. He thinks back to the meeting, to that moment when Sarah had turned away from him, the dismissiveness in her tone. It's all starting to come together, but the pieces still don't fit. He wants to believe he's wrong, that he's just imagining things, but the evidence is mounting. The way Kevin has started taking credit for his work, the way the others have become more distant, the coldness from Claire, there's too much happening to ignore now. He begins to keep track of the little things, timestamps on emails, the content of conversations he overhears, the way people react when he walks into a room. It's all adding up, slowly but surely. And with each new observation, his resolve hardens. He no longer feels like a victim of circumstance. He's no longer just a passive observer in his own life. He's preparing for something. Something big. The first step is simple: gathering information. He starts documenting everything, each meeting he's excluded from, each conversation where his input is disregarded, every moment where he feels the coldness of betrayal. The next step is figuring out who is behind it, and more importantly, why. But one thing is certain: he will no longer wait in the dark. He's ready to uncover the truth, even if it means confronting the people he once trusted most. The calm facade he's maintained is beginning to crack, and now, for the first time in months, Mark feels an unfamiliar sense of purpose. It's a Thursday afternoon when Mark finally makes his move. For weeks, he's been watching, observing, quietly collecting the pieces of the puzzle. Now, he has all the evidence he needs, and it's time for the truth to come out. The meeting is scheduled for 2 p.m. A typical team check-in, where the department discusses project updates and upcoming initiatives. Mark has been included in the invite, though he knows it's likely just a formality. He arrives early, as always, and watches the room fill with familiar faces. Sarah, Kevin, and the others take their seats without acknowledging him directly. As usual, Sarah sits at the head of the table, her gaze darting around, scanning her phone more than making eye contact with anyone. Mark, however, is no longer the passive observer. He is calm, composed, the quiet intensity of his presence impossible to ignore. He knows they're not expecting this. They're not expecting him to confront them, to unveil the web of deceit they've been weaving. But he's prepared. Every conversation he overheard, every slight, every email ignored, all of it has been meticulously logged. The patterns have emerged, and now it's time for them to face the truth. At 2:02, Sarah calls the meeting to order. Her voice, usually warm and engaging, sounds distant today. The others begin their reports, each of them speaking in that sterile, corporate language that's become second nature. Mark lets them go through their updates, waiting for the right moment. He's not rushing this. Every word, every glance, is part of the strategy. Then, just as Sarah begins discussing the next phase of the project, Mark speaks up. His voice is calm, unshaken by the weight of what he's about to reveal. Actually, before we continue, I'd like to address something. The room falls silent, the usual hum of office noise replaced by the weight of Mark's words. Sarah glances at him, her eyes narrowing ever so slightly, but she doesn't interrupt. I've noticed a few discrepancies recently, Mark continues, his tone level controlled. A few changes I wasn't initially aware of. For example, I see my name has been removed from the email chain regarding the Madison account. I also noticed that Kevin was assigned the lead role on the Henderson project, even though I had been handling it up until that point. And Sarah, The team's been reassigned tasks that were originally under my responsibility, but I've received no updates or explanations. He pauses, letting his words sink in. The tension in the room is palpable, but Mark remains composed, the picture of calm resolve. He lets the silence stretch, allowing the implications of his observations to settle. Sarah's smile is tight, almost imperceptible. I'm sure there's a simple explanation, Mark. These things happen sometimes. But Mark isn't buying it. He leans forward slightly, his gaze never leaving hers. You see, I don't think it's just one of those things, Sarah. I've been paying attention. The exclusion, the subtle changes, those aren't just coincidences. I've documented every conversation, every missed email, every meeting I've been left out of. He slides a folder across the table, letting it land in front of Sarah. The folder is thick, filled with printouts, screenshots, and email threads. The evidence is undeniable. Sarah's face pales slightly. She shifts uncomfortably in her seat, but she doesn't reach for the folder. Kevin, who had been sitting silently next to her, shifts nervously as well. The others at the table glance between Mark and Sarah, unsure how to respond, but Mark can tell they're already starting to understand where this is going. I've also been in touch with HR, Mark adds, his voice unwavering. They confirmed that certain reports I had submitted, have been altered before being sent out to clients. The changes weren't authorized by me, and they weren't in line with the original project goals. Sarah opens her mouth, likely to defend herself, but Mark cuts her off. Save it, Sarah. I know exactly what's been happening here. You've been quietly undermining me, taking credit for my work, and cutting me out of the loop. And I'm sure you've done it with a few others too, if we're being honest. The room remains still, the only sound is the faint click of someone's pen against the table. Sarah's face flushes, but she doesn't respond immediately. Kevin, meanwhile, shifts in his seat, eyes darting between Mark and the door. The tension in the room is suffocating, but Mark doesn't break his calm. I don't know what you were hoping to accomplish, Mark says softly, his voice still steady. But I'm done being the invisible man in this office, and I'm not going to let you, or anyone else, manipulate the situation to cover your tracks. Sarah's jaw clenches. She stands abruptly, clearly rattled, but still trying to maintain control. You have no idea what you're talking about, Mark. These are all misunderstandings. If you just... No, Mark interrupts, his voice cutting through her excuses like a knife. I've seen the emails, I've seen the manipulations, and I've been patient. But this isn't a misunderstanding. It's a deliberate attempt to push me out. The silence in the room is suffocating now, broken only by the sound of Mark's steady breathing. He feels no anger, no need to lash out. The truth is laid bare, and there's nothing they can do to deny it. Kevin opens his mouth, but Mark doesn't even give him a chance to speak. I've already contacted a lawyer, he adds, voice calm but firm. If this continues, I'll have no choice but to take legal action. Mark doesn't need to say anything else. The room is thick with the realization of what's happening. The truth has been revealed, and now the consequences are on the table. The days following Mark's confrontation unfolded quickly, but with an eerie calmness that matched the meticulous way he had prepared for this moment. The first to act was the company's HR department. With all the documentation Mark had presented, emails, altered reports, witness statements from his colleagues, there was no room for denial. Sarah's involvement in the underhanded activities became clear, and she was swiftly suspended pending an investigation. Kevin, who had been complicit in the silent power grab, wasn't spared either. His name, too, surfaced in the chain of fraudulent activities, and his standing in the company faltered as a result. The legal proceedings were inevitable. While the company conducted its internal investigation, Mark's lawyer moved swiftly, sending formal notices of his intent to sue for defamation and damages. It wasn't just about the money, though that would be part of the settlement. It was about making sure this kind of behavior would not go unchecked in the future. The reputation of those who had attempted to drag him down was tarnished, their credibility shattered. In boardrooms across the city, Sarah's name became a cautionary tale, her ambition now seen as her greatest weakness. Mark never sought to harm her beyond what was necessary. It was clear from his calm demeanor during the entire process that he had no desire for personal vengeance. His actions were strategic, methodical. He had simply exposed the truth, and in doing so, restored a sense of fairness in a world that often favored the powerful and the manipulative. His satisfaction came not from seeing Sarah fall but from seeing justice delivered, a quiet validation of his choice to remain composed and measured through it all. For him, justice wasn't about emotion or revenge, it was about ensuring the right outcome, regardless of the personal cost. As for Mark, his life moved forward. The weight of the betrayal had long since fallen from his shoulders. The isolation, the subtle exclusion, it was all behind him now. He walked into his new role with a quiet confidence, the experience having forged a deeper understanding of how people operate and how easily power can be abused. The lessons learned were painful, but they were also invaluable. Sitting at his new desk, in a new office that overlooked the city skyline, Mark took a deep breath. The view was stunning. The glass walls reflected the setting sun, casting long shadows across the room. But it wasn't the view that captivated him. It was the feeling of peace that had settled within him. A peace that came not from the outcome, but from knowing he had done what was right. The feeling of being in control of his life once again, of not allowing others to determine his fate. This was the real victory. His phone buzzed. An email from HR, confirming the settlement, finalized. Another email from his lawyer, updating him on the conclusion of the legal proceedings. And then there was the message from his former colleague, John, offering congratulations for standing up to the injustice. John's words weren't much, but they meant something. You did what most people wouldn't. I respect that. Mark smiled briefly, the kind of smile reserved for moments of quiet reflection. He didn't need the approval of others, but it was nice to know that his actions hadn't gone unnoticed. As the evening approached, Mark stood and walked over to the window. The city stretched before him, a sea of lights twinkling beneath the darkening sky. He had come a long way from the man who had once been passive, overlooked, the man who had been willing to suffer in silence, who had allowed himself to be pushed aside, to be taken for granted. That man was gone, replaced by someone who knew how to stand his ground, someone who understood the importance of resilience, of integrity. The journey had been long, and it had been hard. But Mark wasn't the same person he had been when he first walked into that office, when he first believed that hard work and loyalty would be enough. He had learned that sometimes you had to fight for your place in the world, not with anger or resentment, but with clarity, strategy, and resolve. And as he gazed out at the city below, Mark knew that this was just the beginning. There would always be challenges, always obstacles, but now, he was prepared. No longer would he let life unfold around him. He would shape it. With the calm, measured hand of someone who had learned that the most powerful weapon wasn't anger, but clarity. And in that moment, he understood that his true strength wasn't just in surviving betrayal, it was in thriving after it. The journey was far from over, but whatever came next, Mark was ready for it.